People who have been sewing for a long time have a long list of sewing related things that they have tried and that they like or that worked or not worked. And it's usually in the realm of sewing machines and sergers, cutting tools. But there are little things that actually make a really big difference in the sewing experience, if not so much in the finished garment. And today we're going to talk about one of those. Hello everybody, I am June and thank you for tuning in to another video. Today, as you can see in my array here, I'm going to talk to you about pins. Specifically, well, not only, but mostly straight pins and 4 kinds. And then at the end, I am going to give you an alternative to pins that is not basting. Now, I probably don't have to tell you why you need pins, and pins are very useful, and there is a big controversy about whether pinning is in fact useful. I happen to think it is, and how many pins you should have. And pinless sewing is a thing, especially in, like, say, the garment industry, and people who try to replicate sewing that quickly at home tend to not like putting pins in because you have to take the time to take your pins out. And again, whether you sew over your pins or not, there's all kinds of opinions on that. I don't anymore because I have sewn through pins more than once in broken needles. So I don't do it anymore, especially when you're sewing with an expensive machine that can throw it out of time, and it is a disaster. But let's talk about the pins that I have here. I have 4 different kinds, and I am going to explain to you how I came to get them and what I think about them and what my favorite is. So these here are your standard dressmaking pins. They're a little short. They're also tailoring pins, but they're just like standard metal, basically, pins with little pin heads. And they are usually the first kind of pin that people get. Now, I personally don't like them. I find them too short to meet my needs. And also, I find the tips to be very blunt. And it's very difficult to get the pins to go through materials. And when you're working with like slightly thinner fabrics, that can sometimes ruin them. I am not a fan, but I have these because when I started doing tailoring classes at the Fashion Institute of Technology, the professor insisted that these were the kinds of pins that we needed to get. So I only use these for class because I do not like them. Now, these pins here are the ones that I have been using more or less since I started sewing. They are slightly longer. Let me see. They are about 1.5 inches from the very tip of the pin to the very end of the head. These heads are pearlized plastic, and they do not come off. You can find these in all sorts of colors, pearlized and not pearlized. They are sharp enough to get the job done, and it is my preferred length, is 1.5 inches. And I have been using these, like I said, since I started sewing. And the problem that I find with them, even though they are, spoiler, my favorite, the problem with them is that if you find yourself pressing seams, hems, whatever, with pins in them, you have to be very careful because this plastic will melt, and it will melt onto your iron, and if you're unlucky, it will melt onto your fabric. So because I was having to be extremely careful with these, and I have melted the heads of more pins than I care to count, I decided that I wanted to try Glasshead pins. And the only ones that I could find were these on this side. Now, these are slightly shorter. They are about 1 inch and, I don't know, about 3/8 or so. Not that big in a difference in length. But these are a lot thinner, and they are incredibly sharp. So sharp, in fact, that I basically prick myself about every 3 seconds. And as much as I love the Glasshead, that it does not melt, I do not like how sharp they are on my body because it hurts. Another problem that I have found, and I think that maybe you can see it with this one a little bit, actually maybe not, is that they are so thin that they bend very easily. So if you're pinning thicker fabrics, they will bend and they will mold to the fabric, which is not good. I do, however, like that they don't melt, but they are the ones that I'm currently using because I got them recently and I'm giving them a fair try. But so far, I do think that I'm gonna go back to the Pearlized, slightly thicker ones. These are great if you are sewing with very thin, delicate fabrics like silk, which you should always pin within the seam allowance anyway, but they need a sharp pin so that it doesn't damage the fabric. These are good for that. But for my everyday sort of regular sewing, they are too thin and too sharp. Now these here, they are a little funky and they are obviously not regular straight pins, even though I'm putting them in the straight pin category. As you can see, they are double pronged and they are specialized sort of pins. They are great for when you're trying to match seams, like in the underarm, you have seams that need to be aligned. So you put the pins in with one prong on each side of the line that needs to match with the other one, and it keeps them together. They are also great for pattern matching because you have more control over the placement and the holding of the fabric in place. Now they are not that sharp, so you do have to work hard at putting them in. And when you are placing these, you want to place them in such a way that when you are sewing the pins, so the head of the pin is in the direction of the edge of the seam allowance. That way you can sort of move the pin back so that it's essentially still keeping the fabric together without going under the needle, if that makes sense. I mean, I suppose you could also do it the other way around, but I usually use these with my serger, which means that they can only be in this direction because obviously you have loopers come from the right side, but they are very, very useful. If I had to rate them, not counting these because those serve a slightly different purpose, my rating would be 1 for these would be second place, and these would be trash. But I have to use them for class, so I keep them. But all in all, I think these are a good compromise between usability of the pin with also the price, because the Glasshead pins are very expensive, and you can get these for like, $13, $14 for like, 500 pins or something. And these are a little more expensive. These are also very cheap. But these are the sorts of things that people don't usually talk about because it seems like such minor things. But believe me, when you are being constantly poked by these pins, you think about pins a lot, which is what got me to this video. And now the promised alternative to pins. Now, of course, there's always basting. But if you don't want to base and you don't want to use pins, depending on what kind of sewing you are doing, you could use these clips. And I don't think that there's an actual name for them. I know that is it the Dritz? I think maybe Dritz or Clover sells them as Wonder Pins. I don't remember. But they are just like little, like alligator style clips almost. And these wouldn't work for very thin fabrics, but it would work for medium to heavyweight fabrics. And they're mostly a quilting notion, but I don't quilt and I still use them. I think they are really great for especially heavier fabrics or like wools, for example. When you're making coats, they are really very helpful. And they are also very cute. And when they are in their box, they sound like candy. Always very fun. Well, that was a short video that you didn't ask for, but now you know more about pins than you wanted to know about pins. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.